Hey everybody, it's Avi Tenenbaum with Torah for Real People, and I'm really excited to introduce you to this new series with Devora Shabtai. Devora Shabtai is an amazing person. She's going to be teaching us a lot of really important things that I think all of us can find to be relatable, and when you hear about them, your jaw will drop and you'll be like, I can't believe nobody ever put it into such good words until now. I'm going to read you the formal introduction of who Devora is on paper, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit my experiences with her and what we're trying to do with this series. So Devora Shabtai, LCSW, MSc, PhD candidate, currently serves as the Vice President of Clinical Programming at Onward Living, an addiction rehabilitation program for Jewish men in Boca Raton, Florida, in the United States. Devora specializes in the treatment of addiction and spiritual/religious trauma, as well as clinical program design that is tailored to meet the clinical and cultural needs of members of the Orthodox Jewish community within both inpatient and outpatient levels of care. Alongside clinical work, Devora has a background in evidence-based research, and her current doctoral research is examining spiritual religious identity development and its relationship to mental health. So Devora is this amazing, frum person. She's also a clinician, a Jewish woman, a mother, a researcher, everything and all of that together. How amazing. And she's researching the interaction between being a frum person and being perhaps raised as a religious person, and the interaction that has with mental health. And sometimes that interesting interaction makes it harder for people, and they get help, they get treatment for their symptoms, but this whole angle of challenge and difficulty that they experience as being a Jewish person with mental health challenges isn't addressed. And Devora comes and she puts it into words, and when you hear that, you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe nobody ever put it into such perfect words like these, and people feel validated. And Devora's work is all about mapping out what is religious trauma. What are those interactions between Judaism, mental health? How does that show up for real people? What does that make them feel like? And how does that dictate how their healing process should be? So we're very, very excited. This is so relevant. It's so nogea to everybody. And we're going to be having a number of these conversations, and each one is going to add new facets, new perspectives. We're going to go into a lot of really fascinating side topics, and it's just this unfiltered conversation between two people in the same line of work. I have to tell you something amazing about Devora before we begin. Devora watched a number of our videos on Torah for Real People, and when we first got together and started talking about this type of work, she was relating to me some of her insights about our videos, and I felt like she understood the videos that we made better than I do. So with that in mind, it's a big honor. We're very excited, looking forward, and we're going to now tune in to Devora. Stay tuned for all the different parts of this series. Very excited and looking forward. Hey Devora, how are you?
I'm doing well, very excited to be talking to you.
I heard a lot of great things that you're doing. I'm sitting here in Eretz Yisrael. Your name came up the other day from a friend of mine. A lot of people are talking about the interest that you have in religious trauma. And I think you got recently onto a bunch of different podcasts in the United States talking about this issue. This is a very, very passionate issue for me. And I'm so happy that somebody like you is out there and trying to develop what it is. How does it affect people? And eventually, I assume your goal is to help people with it, but there are some steps that we have to map out before that. So I'm really excited to meet you, hear about what is religious trauma, what do you even mean by the words, how did you get into this, and we'll develop the conversation from there, and it's going to be really, really helpful. So why don't you jump in?
Yes, thank you. So this is a topic that in and of itself, has so many multidimensional layers. And I think that's why every time I think about it, every time I speak about it, every time I encounter an individual who has gone through it, I am blown away by just how many different forms this particular struggle has. And I think really the first need here is to expose other people, which is why I'm so glad that we're doing this. And I know, Rabavi, you've spoken about this in so many different ways as well. Just to understand what we mean when we say that somebody has struggled and encountered a painful experience within their religious identity and within their religious life. For some people, that has one route right? There was one particular path that took for them to get to that place. And then the rabbit hole from there can mean one thing, and for others it means something else. And so I think, one thing that I was excited in some of our previous discussions was taking a look at what this issue actually is before we get into how we heal it, how we deal with it, what to do about it, just understanding almost within a person's psyche how this issue interrupts their functioning. And so I think that's kind of where we need to start, is just the definition itself.
As you speak, each word that you say, you're getting me to think so much. It's such an important topic. There's so much to say. It's so necessary that we define what is religious trauma. So far, what I hear you saying is there are people who are religious. They belong to a religion. This adds to them some sort of identity. This is part of their identity. This is part of how they behave. So they behave differently, they think differently, and something happens, which we didn't say what. And then somehow the fact that they're religious in that difficult situation makes it harder, makes it difficult. Is that what it is? Is that the right direction?
Yes, absolutely. So I think let's start just kind of taking, a high level bird's eye view, right? So I am someone who is born into a particular community, into a particular worldview. I don't know anything else. And I come into the world, and just like I'm still, having to learn what it means to be taken care of. So I learned that from my parents, from my caretakers, and from there shapes my entire worldview. I'm born into a community. I'm born into this lifestyle called Judaism. And that has so many different components. On the one hand, that means that is the people that I am surrounded by. And so my first question is, are these people safe? Are these people a group of people that I feel that I am part of and that I am connected to? And so in my early years, I'm just sensing, if this is a place of safety for me. And so my experiences within schools, my experiences within my peers, my experiences within the religious leaders that I have, and this is not an explicit process, but I am building within me, first and foremost, just my sense of where I stand within this community, within this group. The same way that a child is learning that in all types of different ways, having nothing to do with religion, right? How a person feels in relation to their peers. Do I have an identity? Do I have a belonging? Do I have what to contribute? Are my teachers, or then when I grow up, is the societal leaders, people that I trust, people that I can turn to? How do they feel about me? And so before we even get into the building blocks of one's existential, philosophical beliefs, what I find is that for many in the early years, religion means the community surrounding me and finding my place there. And I don't mean yet in terms of a higher level identity. I just mean in terms of safety. And before we even get to a child's feeling of safety or belonging within community, their first micro community is their family. And so at the same time, I'm learning how my parents relate to me and how I am operating within my family. And if it's a religious family, that means that every message being downloaded about my worth and my value and my connection and relationships within my micro family now becomes a micro religious community. And so school then becomes my bigger religious community. How I am in shul. If my father and me are having great experiences within shul, that's now being downloaded in terms of the safety within religion. So I want to just kind of pause there, because when we talk about religious trauma, I think there is this immediate association that we're talking about one's relationship or beliefs in Hashem, how they believe in terms of the 613 mitzvos, some more philosophical beliefs and therefore, practices. But we're not even talking about that yet. That's going to be the application for many. But first and foremost, religious trauma, one of the most destructive pieces is that it interrupts my ability just to feel safe within where I stand.
Developmental psychology talks about the steps of a child being born, growing up, and learning things about themselves, which you described so well. So let's take somebody who they grew up in the jungle. There's no technology there. The threats in that environment are lions and tigers, the rival tribe that wants to wipe them out, let's say. And even there, this person is a child and they have to learn what is a safe environment. When am I not safe? When am I yes safe? Who should I be hanging out with? What should I be doing? What's a good idea? What's a bad idea? How do I contribute to my tribe? How do I pester my tribe and be undesirable? What do I do to, yes, be desirable? So we're kind of learning our place in the world, who I am as a person. What does it mean to be me to other people? The way people treat me, what does that covertly say about me? Let's say I'm not good at shooting animals and hunting in the middle of this jungle, and I keep missing, and I'm supposed to bring a certain amount of food back to the tribe, and I'm just not good at bow and arrow. I keep failing. I'm not good at that. And everybody gives me this face when I come back, and they're like, what, another time you didn't manage to bring back what you were supposed to? And I feel stupid. And I feel that people think I'm stupid. And now I'm developing this idea that I'm useless, I'm a burden, I'm not contributing, people don't like me. So it doesn't have to go that way. It can go in the positive way. But you're saying that across all cultures, anywhere in the world, any country, language, religion, this could occur in Islam, Christianity. This is what people do when they're young. And Jewish people do this in Jewish communities with Rabbeim, with Chumash, with whatever artifacts, figures, people, ideas, environments, like a Shabbos meal, are in their jungle. That's their jungle. They have Shabbos meals, they have Kiddush, they have Rabbeim, they go to shul, and this is their jungle. That's what you're saying.
That's all they know. And this is nothing to do with religion whatsoever. And I think it's very important to start there. I mean, whether we want to get technical and talk about, Piaget or Erikson stages of development, at an early age, a person is forming those deeper beliefs. And they really do have to pass through various stages to achieve emotional well-being. And we know within psychological theory that if there is an interruption within any of those stages, we can almost predict what type of dysfunction is going to be caused within the psyche. And so before we even plug in anything to do with Yiddishkeit, Hashem, the Torah, we have to situate this conversation within basic development. And so I think that with this in mind, we can almost lay out different challenges that are going to inevitably interact with the basic developmental stages and in turn affect their ability to relate to religion and Hashem in a healthy way. And so maybe, I know we had kind of talked about some very universal archetypes, for who is more susceptible to religious trauma. And I think we have to make a disclaimer. Again, none of what we're talking about has anything to do with the actual truth, obviously, of Yiddishkeit, of the Torah in and of itself. It's when people and people's psychological development and people's family and community interactions and experiences are going to rub up against their ability to assimilate the truth of Torah. That's what we're talking about. And I think that's why it's important that we are putting this in a trauma lens, because trauma is something that by definition means that I have a normative set of experiences that a person is supposed to have and is healthy for them to have. And if there is a bomb being dropped in any one of those stages or any one of those early formative years, we're going to understand how that's going to interrupt later on how they go about relating to themselves, to the others, and to the world. And it's no different when we talk about religious development. And I think what we're doing here is we're putting together our understanding of normative development with what we expect and know about someone's healthy spiritual personality, healthy religious life and lived experience. And we're saying, how can we understand why somebody does have anger toward God, or somebody wants to leave the faith and the community because of something that's happening along the way of those building blocks of their development. And so I think with proper understanding of this, then we can go into really understanding more methodically how we can go about preventing these issues from occurring and addressing it when it does occur. But I think we really have to understand just what context we're talking about when we talk about these issues.
What I got from you so far is that religious trauma is connected at least to some universal ideas that people grow up in the world and interact with their environment and learn about themselves from things around them and things that happen to them and the way people treat them, etc. And religious people have this in their environment, have this in their world. And if something goes wrong in some part of their life, it can have to do with religion and therefore cause religious trauma, or maybe it had to do with something else but then by proxy, indirectly somehow affect religion. But the point is, religion's in my life, I'm in my life, and so when things go on in my life, it can affect religion. That's just on one foot. That's the simple thing about it, right? So here's my next question for you, Devora. Why should we care to know what religious trauma is and fix it? What's wrong with this? What's the problem? What are you trying to fix? What do you see? You see there is some big need. What are you looking at?
Beautiful question. So many answers are coming to mind. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to kind of throw out some different thoughts. First and foremost, what religious trauma does to a person in and of itself is painful, and in and of itself causes, I think, more damage than a person even realizes. But the most painful thing that I've seen that it does is that it really can strip a person from their ability to have the inner reservoir, so to speak, of support that they need to go through life in a healthy way. And what I mean by that in simple English is that for many people, just a deeper spiritual connection, forgetting even what it does again to their self-identity. We're going to talk about that in a later conversation. But for a person to go through life and not be able to have that very meaningful relationship, and what I mean is their inner relationship to Hashem, to their higher power, that itself becomes interrupted, because what starts to happen is if I've gone through something within the religious trauma realm, I am now inevitably going to struggle with pain toward my connection to Hashem. And that itself, the fact that that gets so muddled and so confusing, and it's almost like I don't have access to that relationship anymore. To me, that's one huge destructive outcome of religious trauma. And here again, I want to just keep making this disclaimer. This has nothing to do with being a practicing Jewish person, and following mitzvos. I want to be very clear. The goal of anything to do with understanding and treating religious trauma isn't so then now we do kiruv. But when we understand the emotional damage that's caused, I think that's first and foremost. And the biggest emotional damage I've seen, again, is the fact that people get so turned off from anything that within a normal process of development becomes the person's whole inner psyche. The fact that I can turn to a higher power, the fact that I can turn to the fact that Hashem, guides this world in a way that is caring toward me and has meaning, and there's purpose in my challenges, and my life has meaning to it in and of itself. The fact that those beliefs and that relationship get so cut off before a person even has a chance to explore their own belief system. Like, the problem was already there before they had a chance to sit with the philosophy. Because now anytime they hear something religious, anything that's taught by a rabbi, anything that's being taught from the pulpit becomes a source of just pain. Plugging this back into the stages of development, if I haven't even had a chance to sit with any machshava sefer and actually ask myself, do I believe in this? Right? Do I believe Hashem created the world? Do I believe Hashem has my best interest in mind? Do I believe I need to do mitzvos? If I can't even at the proper time wrestle with the things that people are supposed to wrestle with, because anytime I think about this, I've worked with people who, when they literally open up a sefer, they have a visceral emotional reaction. Because when they were younger, they had such negative experiences in school, in shul, with their fathers learning, and their fathers would wag their finger and scream, in terms of learning. So now how could I ever open up a Derech Hashem and wrestle with concepts of Tachlis Abriya and Bechira and Nisyonos and actually go through these things, which in and of itself is a whole process, if I don't even have access to the basic questions that are going to forge who I am within my life going forward? That is painful.
I hear two things as you're talking, but maybe it's two sides of the same coin. So I'll tell you what I'm hearing, and then you'll help me understand, because you're the therapist. I hear you saying that there are two problems. Problem A is there's this powerful reservoir of spirituality, of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, of faith, of Torah, of ideas that can help me grow, help me navigate life's challenges. And we need that. And if we're cut off from things that we need to navigate life, it's bad. It's not a good situation. I need the manual of how to live life. I need a source of strength when things are difficult. I need some sort of system of meaning to justify my suffering and explain what the purpose of my life is and what I'm doing and why I go through the things that I do, etc. And that's what the Torah comes to give. But I can't access this because I had some negative experience. So I don't have.
Yeah, and if I can interrupt just for 1 second, because even if a person has a right to conclude, I don't believe in Hashem, I don't believe in the Torah, I want to go off and go to the Buddhist mountains, and that's what I believe. That's their decision to make. But if I don't even have that decision to make, because my decision was made for me, because my entire wiring and my visceral emotional reactions is going to keep me from that, that's the pain.
You remind me of Rav Valba and Ali Shor. I just looked it up the other day. Rav Valba says that you should relate to each person as if they have no free will until they go out of their way to learn free will. And I love that because regular human beings, as far as I understand, react to things. They don't choose anything. They just react. You call them a name, they insult you back. You surprise them, they scream. Everything is reactive. You put good food in front of them, they indulge and just eat as much as they can. Everything is a reaction. And bechira, or free will, is let me choose what I want to do. Let me not just automatically behave. Let me decide the right way to behave and carry that out. That's with a regular person without any trauma at all. Rav Valba says they have no free will. They have to learn the skill of overcoming their automatic behaviors, their impulses, their fears, their temptation, their lust, whatever you call it. You're talking about an even worse situation. Not only do they not know how to choose, but the script has already been written for them in the opposite direction. It's been written that they will choose a different way. It's been wired out of the way of the direction that most people go. It reminds me of the Mishnah in Avos, which says that when you teach somebody something new, that's easier than when you're taking somebody who already learned something and you're trying to get them to understand it. And so it's like the comparison of a clean slate where you're writing something for the first time, or there's a piece of paper that somebody already wrote an essay on it and you took your eraser and you erased 25 lines and it's all smudged and you're trying to rewrite something. And those are the people that you're talking about. So you're saying they don't even have a choice. It's been written for them that they're going to make certain choices, and this is because of certain negative experiences. And you want to step into that space and help them get back their choice. So far, that's what I heard you say. That's one side of the coin. The second side of the coin that you didn't speak about a lot, but you mentioned it once, is that there will also be trauma triggers for people who are traumatized by religion. Because, like you said, if the father is hypercritical of the son, he's not learning well, he doesn't understand properly, he's not davening with kavanah, the father's busy yelling at him, now shul becomes a trauma trigger. Davening is a trauma trigger. It's a source of pain. It evokes a memory that you are incompetent, you are stupid, you're not doing good enough. So not only do they not get access to the beautiful reservoir of Hashem and the Torah and all that has to offer, it even becomes painful. It even becomes a source of pain. It's two sides of a coin. That's what I heard you say.
Exactly. And it's almost like the most tragic irony, right? Because the Beis Medrash is supposed to be the place of the deepest forms of inspiration, of searching for truth, of feeling connected to my fellow learners, to having mentors and rebbeim and people I am admiring. And then when for a very local reason, for some people, it's actually specific experiences in the Beis Medrash I found. For some people, it's years and years and years. And again, we're going to get into this in future discussions in terms of the different archetypes of religious trauma. But if I have repeated negative experiences in the Beis Medrash, now I've lost that ability for the Beis Medrash to be anything besides a makom of pain. And if in shul, which is supposed to be the place in this world for the deepest connection, again, both to Hashem through tefillah, also to community. And I've had negative experiences in the shul. And again, we'll go over some examples of that in future conversations. Now I lost that place. And to me, the most heartbreaking thing is the fact that these places that are supposed to be the building block of one's religious life, of one's communal life, of one's spiritual life, of one's emotional support, where we go, who do we go to in times of distress for anyone who's healthy in their religious functioning. It's these places, it's these people, and the fact that they lose those places and now it becomes a weapon. It backfires as a source of pain. It's like, where does that person go? When I hear these stories from my clients, it's like the feelings of being trapped is the worst feeling, because it's not just that they can leave those places. It's that there's a part of the human psyche and the neshama that craves those places. And so it's this double bind and it's catch-22 that I find is the most painful thing.
That reminds me of in the trauma field. I've been heavily involved in the trauma field, acute trauma, disaster trauma, also post-trauma. But there is a distinction in professional literature between types of trauma. So if you say what type of trauma is worse than the other, it's hard to quantify that. And obviously for each person, it's the worst. So it's a bit of an unfair thing to say, but right? Because we're not looking to take away somebody's experience and say, oh, yours isn't as bad as the other guys. But if there is such a thing that you can look at a group of people that went through this type and a group that went through that type and follow them over many years and say, who comes out struggling more often than the other group? That one of the findings they see is that natural traumas, natural disasters, a bookcase that randomly falls on top of a child and kills the child, chas v'shalom, it's tragic, but it's random. But if you take something which involves interpersonal violence, like rape, like a mugging, war, there's an element of malevolence where it's not only that something terrible happened, not only is this unspeakable as it is, but somebody went out of their way with intent to hurt me. So now when you're telling me, Devora, about how not only is religion not accessible because they're traumatized, it becomes the source of pain, I think that's like the highest level of malevolence. It's like a child should feel loved and protected by their parents. Not only was this person not protected by their parents abused them. It's like the highest, most confounding, difficult level of malevolence. It's like the worst of the worst type of betrayal and pain and unspeakable, despicable terror that there could be. My own parents went out of their way to hurt me. It's not just a random thug in the street. It's my own father or my own mother or both. And that's just unfathomable. Like, how does that even make sense? And
just to add to that, just before we move on, if I may, to the next point, it's very similar, what I find, because if a person goes through something, the bookcase falls on someone, what gets activated is my resilience. What gets activated is my ability to make meaning of this, to put this in a framework of understanding. If I can't develop that framework of understanding, and I can't have resilience, therefore, and it doesn't make sense to me, that's like, this is the trauma we're talking about, that the whole framework of meaning is the one that gets blackened and muddled over.
So you're saying in this type of case, in regular trauma, I would have accessed my source of meaning wherever I get that from. Maybe it's lyrics in a rock song, or maybe it's from Sifrei Musar. But wherever it's from, I'm using resources to understand what I'm going through and how to get through this and what it means about me, and to turn this into something as reasonably positive as I can, let's say. But when I have religious trauma, then I can't even use what I needed in order to do this. So like you said, I'm trapped. I really like that word. I'm trapped.
And watching people go through it, who describe it, there is a feeling of trappedness that I have never seen before in people who have gone through more horrific traumas in a classical sense, but who have an inner source of connection to faith, to Hashem, to just the concept that things have meaning, that there's hashgacha pratis in this world, that things ultimately are for the good. If that whole set of principles and values and concepts I'm wrestling with, because I just don't even trust, I don't feel safe within this entire conversation. Anything with a Hebrew term, and I've seen this before, it's like I can't even look at Hebrew words on a sefer because of my 10 years in the yeshiva system. What do I do when I go through normal traumas or experiences or pain that every single person goes through? Where do I turn? And so again, and this is something I think we're going to get into in a more organized way, but where do I turn? I turn to substances. I turn to self-soothing with addiction or with certain unhealthy behaviors, because then I can feel like I can cope and I feel like I belong somewhere. Where do I turn? I turn to gangs of people who are doing dangerous, unhealthy things, but where I feel like I can belong. Where do I turn? I turn to self-harming. I turn to feeling suicidal. I turn to sleeping in my bed all day and I don't leave my house. I turn to just feeling horrific about myself, so I don't think that I'm capable of growing in my identity, so I just turn inward and I collapse. That's the only place to turn if I can't turn to these other things.
You're saying that the way a regular or healthy person would meet life's challenges, regulate their feelings, soothe themselves, would ideally be with some sort of way that creates more solutions than problems, right? Unlike drugs, let's say, that actually works, that actually has meaning, that's affordable, that's not illegal, all the things you want to call it. And we could be doing that with God. We could be doing that with spirituality. And since we're barred from that, and that's how it was meant to be, and we can't get there, we're forced to do this in all these other ways, which create problems and then cascading layers and layers of even more problems. And before you know it, they wind up in treatment centers like the one that you run years later, right?
And then they're blamed for the fact that now these problems are because they're an addict, they're a druggie, they're a lowlife, they have mental illness. And that becomes now the most pain because the resentment is added on to all the other things. And again, this conversation today is just to open up the dialogue of all of these different struggles and problems and societal problems that are related to religious trauma without us all even have realizing it. And we're not going to go into the solutions today. We're not going to go into all of the different places that religious trauma is born. Because I know something we've talked about is for some people, religious trauma starts because I might have a mental health condition, or I do already have something about me, a learning challenge, whatnot, and therefore the religious trauma gets, brought in because of that. So the direction can be, multifaceted. But what I want to talk about and kind of solidify today is the fact that it's this vicious, horrific, painful cycle that needs to be interrupted.
Right. And I'd jump in. First of all, this is absolutely just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we have to have a lot of these conversations and flush this out. But when you say that they're trapped, not only can they not use a system of meaning to deal with life and to find relief and find meaning, but I also thought of other examples where the trappedness shows up, where they feel trapped in other ways. And again, I don't want to get too much into the examples because we're going to get more concrete next time. But people don't suddenly change from how they grew up. I live in Israel 21, maybe 22 years. I still feel on some level like an American. As much as I have nothing to do with America, I almost never visit, somehow I'm an American, right? That's the message of Lech Lecha. You were born in a certain place, you were raised a certain way, and that somehow sticks with you. And that's very profoundly deep within you, and it's somewhat inescapable. And so when people that I see have religious trauma, not only do they feel trapped in the sense that they can't access this beautiful reservoir of meaning to get through life, but they also wish they can go back, but they just can't figure it out for the life of them. And that's not always the case, but it's certainly sometimes the case. And you reminded me of this when you were talking about, there are people that want to get back into the Beis Medrash. They grew up believing that was important. They believed that mitzvahs were important. This was an important belief to them. This is part of their belief system. It's not like that changed. They just can't do it in the way that works out. And that must be the most frustrating, painful thing. It's like you absolutely love something and believe in it, but can't do it. But you feel you have to do it. And you feel you're going to give a reckoning on it in the world to come. And you want to do it. And you're excited to do it. And you can't do it. It's like this catch-22.
And I think the most similar thing I've been able to see in other contexts is attachment trauma and attachment wounds. Because what does a person need more than anything else, right? Is to feel that safe attachment and that secure attachment. And usually that happens because I have my mother, or I have my parents, or I have, again, there's caretakers. And I need that. But if those people, for various reasons we're not going to get into now, I didn't have that, but I need that, and now I have a guard around it, where do I go? And in future relationships, when there's new people who want to connect with me, I'm going to assume they're going to cause me pain. So I have them at a distance, and it's that same catch-22. These are fundamental, universal things we need in this world: love, safety, connection, meaning, purpose. And so when any one of these bigger constructs has some type of painful tainting to it, and negative, painful associations, and it's just far away from us, now my life itself is bruised. It's not just that one-time experience that I have to process. It is who I am now as a person. And so to answer your question, Avi, that is why this topic I find to be the most important one to address, because I can't think of anything else in this world that doesn't have as deeply rooted of consequences and implications as this one.
Right, because to follow your thought, if you can treat somebody as a mental health professional or talk to somebody as a Rav or whatever the person's role is, maybe you're their best friend, and you're trying to help somebody who's suffering, who has religious trauma, and if you only treat the tip of the iceberg, the symptom, the drug use. Oh, let's get you to stop using drugs. We would think that that's a great solution. He used drugs and now he doesn't. But it goes way beyond that. And because it goes way beyond that, because we haven't helped him to sort out things with his identity, aside from, we both specialize in addiction amongst other things. So aside from, you can't just teach somebody to stop, because Mark Twain said it's easy to stop, but try to stay stopped, right? It's easy to stop smoking. I've done it 1,000 times, right? Like you said before, why are they using drugs? It's because it's solving some sort of problem. If we didn't teach them how to solve it, then it's not really going to be sustainable, right? But aside from all of that, you're saying getting down to the very core of things. How did this person grow up? What are their very core beliefs, the deepest overarching beliefs that kind of guide their decisions and the way they think and the way they view themselves? Just like in the beginning of this conversation, how does he view himself in the community, in his family, as a person? Does he think he's competent? If she's a woman, does she think that she's whatever a woman is meant to be? If he's a man, does he think that he's capable of being a man? Whatever his roles and identities are, and one of them, by the way, is being a Jew. That's its own thing, right? Am I good at being a Jew? Even if this wouldn't be about Judaism, they live in a Jewish community. So now there's like a social thing. Do I fit into my neighborhood? Do I fit into my
culture? My entire cultural set of experiences.
All my family and social networks, presumably if I grew up from, they're all religious. They're all using religious words. They're doing religious rituals. So it's like, it's inescapable. I'm trapped because everywhere I look, there's going to be a mitzvah going on. There's a Dvar Torah going on. There's an expectation that I'm meant to go to shul. There's a
Yontif next month that I'm expected to participate in all different ways.
And so it's everywhere I look. And so if we don't get down to that level and look at that and see the incongruity, I made that word up. You know English. I'm in Israel. What's the right word?
Sounds right.
Incongruence. That's the word. Incongruence. We speak Hebrew at home, by the way. Between, what I believe in versus what I'm doing. That can be one type of incongruence. Or another incongruence is what I feel versus everything surrounding me. I feel aversive to this. This ticks me off. This enrages me. This makes me frightened. This makes me sad. But it's everywhere I look and I can't get rid of it. If I get rid of it, it means I have to get rid of my family. I have to get rid of my neighborhood. And I have to get rid of the way I grew up. And you can run to Peru and never see anybody again. You can't even run away from yourself. You can't run away from your history. It's an inescapable problem. It's in you. You can run as far as you want and it runs right after you. So therefore,
it's everywhere.
Look at it. We have to sort it out.
Exactly. And I'm excited in future conversations that we'll have to really fine tune which type of person is susceptible, to religious trauma and the kind of the different manifestations of it, because it is shocking how it can come in such different flavors and kind of a lot of chicken and the egg situations here that I think we can really dive into. And then in later conversations, God willing, start tackling how it can be addressed, how a person can arrive at healing and move forward, from the damage and pain of religious trauma.
Amazing. This is so important. So I'm looking forward to having more conversations. Today we spoke in a very ambiguous, general way. We took this idea called religious trauma and we're trying to figure out what on earth is this thing? How does it affect people? And I guess as we go on, we're going to fill in more details and eventually we'll hopefully find either a pathway to a refuah, or at least we'll be aware of the problem, which will create the opportunity for other people to figure that out. Ezras Hashem.
Looking forward.
Thank you. Amazing. Good to see you. Thanks for this conversation. Be well.
Thank you as well.